Hello everyone, my name is Anna Fogasato and I'm a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Today I will be presenting on a research project that I'm in the process of conducting alongside Erin Lowe, another PhD student, and our advisor, Dr. Adina Risman. This project is part of the Grassland 2.0 project, which is a USDA-funded multi-year interdisciplinary project that aims to support a just transition towards perennial grass-based animal agriculture in the upper Midwest. A just transition allows everyone to live well without living at the expense of others. This includes the human and the beyond human. Perennial grass-based systems increase water infiltration and retention, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase soil carbon, and promote biodiversity. Nonetheless, we continue to see an increase in confinement operations, a steep reduction of perennial living cover on the land, and increased consolidation which bars many people from staying in farming or getting into farming. Communities of color face particularly high barriers. Therefore, in this project, our research questions include: how do community members think about grazing and the future of the food and farm system in the upper Midwest? How does the current system create barriers and opportunities for managed grazing? How are farmers of color affected by uneven structures of power, and how does that affect pathways for change? And what are some possible pathways for change in policy and governance? To tackle these questions, we interviewed 120 people across the upper Midwest over the span of 1 year, starting in the fall of 2020. Then we did a few rounds of coding while we planned a 3-part participatory workshop series, which took place earlier this year. The purpose of the workshops was to share and engage in a participatory process to analyze the interview data together and engage community members in critical conversations about the justice and racial equity components of a transition in the agricultural sector. We synthesized the interview data and invited a subset of our interviewee pool to participate in these workshops. The workshops were 4 hours each. They took place over Zoom due to the pandemic and were scheduled 2 to 3 weeks apart, starting in January 2022 and ending in early March. The first workshop opened with a more inspirational conversation on future visions for a just food system. In the second workshop, we then focused on identifying needs and opportunities for grazing, considering the constraints of the current system. We created the diagram you see on the slide from the interview data and had workshop participants analyze and discuss the many issues you see here. Additionally, we explored how the work that participants were doing through their farms and NGOs could move us toward a just transition. Finally, in the last workshop, we discussed strategies for building more collective power within and across organizations. Through this research so far, we've learned many lessons about community-engaged participatory research. I'd like to share just a few things that helped us. First of all, relationship building was a crucial part of ensuring the success of the workshop series, as well as ensuring that the research continues to speak to the needs of communities on the ground. The semi-structured interviews were a way for us to start to answer some of our research questions, but also an important way to build relationships across various communities and expand the reach of the project. After a few months of conducting interviews, we realized that much of the project's connections were not very diverse, because the relationships held by the university, as is the case in many other institutions, lies disproportionately with white farmers and white landowners. We dedicated extra time and effort to make new connections with tribal nations, farmers of color, and BIPOC-led organizations. After conducting interviews, we continued to check in with community members, and we held informal one-on-one meetings with them to talk through the direction of the research and to develop the structure of the workshops. This created buy-in and increased participation in the workshops. We made sure to highlight the interests and needs of BIPOC farmers and organizations. For example, at the beginning of our study, we focused particularly on interviewing and engaging with dairy and beef farmers, but we quickly realized that BIPOC communities are farming smaller livestock like non-ruminants, that is, chickens or pigs. Indigenous communities are also interested in these smaller animals, as well as bringing buffalo back on the land. In engaging community members in workshops such as these, it is very important to compensate people for their time. We paid farmers $40 an hour, and we paid organizations that participated in the workshops a $100 stipend. We wanted the workshops to be a space for transformational thinking. We asked participants to reimagine the current food system with a particular focus on a new vision and pathway towards racial equity. Centering justice meant that we were very selective about the pool of workshop participants, making sure that the folks we brought into the space were not only ready and willing to have a conversation about racial justice in the food system, but interested in taking direct action. We received feedback early on from community members when we were getting comments about the workshop structure. And they told us that focusing on participatory activities that asked folks to talk about barriers to change was quite demoralizing and set a negative tone. Therefore, we chose to open the first participatory workshop with exercises that engaged participants on a future vision. Starting with the vision allowed people to be inspired and think more creatively about transformation. To respect people's time and mental energy, we avoided activities that just brought people to a blank page, and we set the table by bringing in data from the interviews that they could then use to discuss their ideas, their initiatives, and the actions they wanted to take. Finally, convening a diverse regional group of NGOs and farmers created new partnerships and conversations among groups that were much needed. We gathered information about each participant and their work to set up activities where participants could discuss gaps in services and areas where more collaboration was needed. We know that some collaborations have already started as a result of the workshop series, but we will continue to work with participants to understand how those are developing and working towards the visions we discussed in Workshop 1. Moving forward, we'll be working on compiling the information we received in the workshop series into a report and packaging the information in ways that are most helpful for participants, such as creating 2-pagers, policy recommendations, and a story bank. We hope this presentation will be helpful when tackling your own work with communities. And with that, we thank you so much for listening.